Thank you for the recording. Yeah, so I'm not here as any kind of expert, like who could be an expert in how things collapse. I mean, there is an academia called collapsology en français. Collapsologists are here, and it's emergent here more, but of course we don't know how to meet it in these times, in these days. So I don't bring expertise here. I just bring having read some things and done some thinking. So you might have read more things and done more thinking. So let's bring all our thoughts together here, all sharing. Um, and then uh, for me, it's a key section of what I'll talk about. A key aspect is keeping ourselves well, and that includes in meetings like this. You probably all had a busy day already, so I'm just going to invite us to just get in our bodies a little bit. And it's, it might not be your thing, but let's just try it. So I've had quite a day, so I'm just going to roll my shoulders a bit. But I think it's like asking, we're not heads in the left hemisphere thinking head, we're bodies, and we're full human beings. So if you listen to your body right now, does it need something? Does it need a bit of a stretch? Can you a big fan of wriggling my toes. It helps me to remember there's that bit of my body as well, because I'm so up here a lot of the time. So I'm just feeling where there's a bit of tension. It has been a bit of a day actually, to do with my court stuff, but
To use this feature, please make sure your app is running and can access the internet.
Oops, what was that? It's all right. Is that Mills having to maybe mute yourself? Okay, so yeah, welcome everybody. So I'm using this term collapse aware because it's a hard thing to face. Part of what our movements are about are letting people know that there's an emergency and asking, demanding that governments and businesses make change. And there's value in that in some ways. And I also think it can mask the fact that we're already in something, and the systems of power as they exist today are unlikely to be able to meet the times to do what's needed. They can't really face the truth, produce the truth, act on the truth, or tell the truth. So, it leaves a lot to us. So collapse awareness to be able to face what these times are. So why are we collapsing? We're collapsing because our climate system is changing in ways that I'm sure you all know about. Um, the finance system that we have has got an inbuilt collapse. At some point, it's basically like a big Ponzi scheme. It'll fall to pieces at some point. You can ask me about any of these things. I'm not getting into the detail. So if anybody's got more curiosity about them, the food system as it's lined up, even without the climate system collapsing's got too many pressures in it. George Monbiot talks about that in Regenesis. And the leading edge of collapse is our mental well-being, in particular, but of course not limited to our young ones. So there's inner collapse in our communities. There's data. If you look at the data about what a thriving human community looks and feels like, we've already entered collapse. This is not something that's coming down the line. It started to happen in 2015, according to Jem Bendell, who's probably one of the, if not the leading collapsologist here in this country. You probably know he wrote the most downloaded climate paper in 2018, Deep Adaptation, and he's just launched this year a new book called Breaking Together, which has got a lot on the data about collapse. So then when we talk about collapse, it's like there's a big question about what's ending and what isn't, because we can, in our feelings of panic in our bodies and wanting to be well together, we can feel like everything's coming to an end. In that way, I'm a bit of a bookaholic. You don't have to read all the books, but if books help, I think At Work in the Ruins by Dougal Hine is a beautiful book. And it's to help us think about yeah, things are falling, the wheels are falling off, as I say, as a perimenopausal woman. Feels like the wheels have gone wonky in my body, and something's coming to an end, but not everything is. And what can we? And some of it, yeah, much of it needs to come to an end. Much of it needs to stop. Um, there is the hopefully the final beautiful book I'll mention is Hospice in Modernity by Vanessa Mercado de Oliveira. Hospice in Modernity, and it's like, how do we help this system, this anti-life system that's around us, to have a good death, including that which lives in us. And it's important to say it's not okay. Like, we can feel panicked with this idea of collapse, but it's not okay what's happening already, right? I mean, what's happening at the minute and has been happening for hundreds of years is extraction and excretion. Extraction from the planet and excretion into the planet, and extraction from people's bodies, exploitation, murderous exploitation, coloniality. That's the basis of our civilization. So we're talking about the collapse of our civilization. Well, it's not okay, this civilization. It's not all bad and wrong. I like it when Dougal Hine points out it'd be nice to hang on to anaesthetic dentistry. Who fancies having their teeth done without a bit of that? You know, there's some good stuff, isn't there? So one way I think about these times is there's a model. You don't need all of this stuff, but if it helps, called the Bacana 2 loop. It just means that something's collapsing and something's emerging as things collapse, right? And what do we need to help in the collapse have a good death, and what do we want to hang on to? What are the seeds of the thing that we want to have emerge, you know? Okay, so and there's much beautiful things that are already here, that are in communities that never succumbed fully to neoliberal capitalism, that are in our histories, that are things that we can lean into. So I'm just pausing a second. Yeah. And then as there's quite a few practical things that I'm going to suggest and talk about, but I think the leading edge of this, from my perspective, as I said, I mean, Vanessa Mercado de Oliveira points this out in Hospice in Modernity, the leading edge is the collapse in mental health, and that will show up in many ways. I wonder about that. I wonder if we can smell each other's pheromones when we're all stressed with the cost of living crisis. I wonder if there are ways we can feel the consciousness of the earth and the dying off of many species. I don't know what creates that. Obviously the technology and its infiltration in our lives, our disconnection from each other in nature. There'll be many contributing factors to our collective mental well-being. And if there was one thing I wanted people to go away with tonight, I would say there's a responsibility on us all to stay well as we can. And if you think that sacrificing your mental well-being to get some stuff done is going to help these times, I would strongly disagree. We need to be well as we can be. Sometimes being well means we need to let ourselves fall to pieces. I'm going to take part in a grief ritual in the morning. So we've talked in Extinction Rebellion about regenerative cultures, and sometimes that gets, it really annoys me when people say this. It not really annoys me, but I try to stop it being said. People say I'm going off on regen. I'm having a break. Regenerative cultures is all the time, right? It's not just having a break. And in particular, it's listening to ourselves. What the systems of modernity do to us is to stop us listening to our own wisdom in our bodies that are constantly telling us what they need. Mine did say it needed a glass of port tonight, so that's the medicine tonight. It's not generally alcohol. Um, yeah, there are ways in which healthy cultures cultivate a good mind together. So if you're working in a group, things like collaborative practices, Belle can send on a document afterwards thinking about how we well collaborate, how do we take care of things that show up in groups. So how do we want to make decisions, how do we want to handle conflict, how do we want to do feedback and learning, those sorts of things. So it's good to think as a group, like both how to set things up systemically so we work well, and also to do things that help us to be well together. Okay, here's one other reference. I love this podcast. It's called The Emerald. It's about animism. Might not be everybody's cup of tea. But there's a lot in there. There's a really amazing one in there called The Revolution Will Not Be Psychologized. And it's a reminder that the way people stay well in healthy cultures is not all sitting down talking and having a feedback session. Some of it's drumming together, dancing together, mayhem, following the seasons, being with the witching times in Samhain as it comes, being round a fire together, going for a walk in nature, swimming in the rivers. There's ways that we can do things together to be together. So they are what wants to emerge, that they don't cost money, these things. They can do, but they don't have to. Breath practices, meditations. Some of it is what we need to do on our own. We need to work out what our thing is, what our things are that help us, but also, what we do collectively. I had the dear good fortune recently to sit with Amanita Dreamer, who's been working out how to be with the red and white spotty mushrooms, a bit of my autistic obsession for the last year. And I can answer questions about that. We drum together with it. Maybe the final thing to mention in this section, and Belle, I can give you a link for this. I had a little download a few weeks ago, months ago maybe, and I called it chuddling, that it's a good time for each of us to think about what we need as an individual in terms of support. And a chuddle is like a chat and a huddle that you might create in a WhatsApp group, and a chuddle. And it's the sort of, you invite in people that you feel connection, closeness with, and they're there for you. And you tell them when you've had a bad day, or you just need to be heard, or see if anybody's there to pick up the phone, or you're ill and somebody might make you a dinner, etc. And people have been really glad to be in people's chuddles, and they've really struggled to set up their own, because I think part of the system of modernity in our bodies is a lack of self-worth and a feeling that we don't deserve stuff. So chuddling is a way forwards. It's a way we can resource ourselves and each other. And because you invite a group, it's a village. So like we all have dramas and stuff going off. So it's not just one person's drama that matters. Like sometimes I can lean in and help. I set up a chuddle for a friend who's having heart surgery. And I knew I couldn't do anything for 2 weeks, but other people did. It's that village feeling. That's what we're bringing back. Okay. So let's be practical as well. I mean, they're all practical things, but what's it going to feel like as collapses here? Well, you can already see like what it means is more people die, like 40,000 excess deaths in the UK last year. And things don't go linear in collapse situations, they can go exponential. So there are many scenarios that may come about in our communities, and I think the more that you've thought about things, the more when they happen, they're not so hard. I mean, I can say that personally as somebody who dreamed in mass civil disobedience, and when the Met Police came and banged on my door at 5:30 in the morning to take me away for conspiracy charges, I just knew that was going to happen at some point. I thought, oh, it's that moment. And when the press have attacked me online and tried to I've just thought, oh, it's that thing happening, What I didn't think about was the intergroup conflicts that happen within activist spaces. That I haven't had so much resilience around, to be honest. So that we need to get better at. Okay, so we think about scenarios, and I'll give some examples. But we don't need to think about them on our own. This is something a climate emergency centre could be doing. If you may have done this already, so I don't mean to say I'm coming up with something new. We've been doing a little bit of this in Stroud, been supporting people doing this a little bit. So the first bit is mapping who's part of the community, who's taking some kind of leadership in that community. So when the pandemic happened, they helped spark the, mutual aid networks. They run centres. They're part of the youth service. They're the counsellors that really get it and are there in service. They could be a business like in Stroud. We've got the Stroud Brewery and others businesses that are really there for the people. Who's there in leadership? What I also wanted to say is any of the things that I'm saying, if you think that was interesting, I'd love to know more about that. I'm talking with people in XRB in the change, including my partner, as sort of community development experts about what we might toolkit up for people if it's helpful. So then what's happened in Stroud is we asked for a meeting with people who are willing to think about collapse. And that was hard to get people in the council to come to a meeting that's talking about collapse, but they came. And it's a sort of journey where you can only go at the pace of the people there. If we were having a meeting about collapse, we could get right into the nub of it quickly, I'm guessing, because we know we all probably been through the grief and the despair and the facing. But what does that mean for somebody who, is running a centre but isn't quite there yet, And when I say a centre, I mean like a community centre rather than a climate emergency centre. Then it's possible for that body of people to think about a couple of things. I mean, lots of things, but the two things I think about. The People's Assemblies, I'll come back to that. I think there's something about scenarios that we're risking and facing together. And I had a meeting a couple of years ago actually with the sort of equivalent of Caroline Lucas in Canada, where they'd had a lot of flooding. And she said what became very apparent was that the public services couldn't cope. You could say that about the pandemic as well, right? They're not going to be able to cope with what's coming. So the community has to come together or fall to pieces or both. Okay, so when we're talking about scenarios in a group, some are going to be easier for people to hear than others. There's going to be another pandemic at some time. Actually, under climate situations and the ecological crisis could be one a year. And we were sort of, in quotes, lucky with COVID in terms of the two things that you measure pandemics against, how quickly they spread and how serious they are. It could have been a lot worse, right? So a worse one could come and bodies might pile up. What are we going to do? I mean, that's a bit cutting to the chase, but what are we going to do when there's another pandemic, if it's worse? Flooding, where are the places at risk of floods? Where do people go in our communities? Who's got the cars that can drive through a flood, or the boats or whatever? Like, what are we going to do if our place floods, or if it has done? What did we learn from it? What can we learn from other places that have flooded? Overheating or being too cold. We've already had in Stroud some centres for people to go to when it's too cold and they can't afford the bills. And actually, of course, it had benefits then. People can be fed then. People can have time together with other people. How do we get people who need to be there who are vulnerable? So centres that can both cool people down and heat them up. What do we do with food shortages? Like if there's a transition where people really have to get into digging for Britain, but there's not food, or there's food shortages with supply chain difficulties. Do we want a metal shed in each parish that's got some staples in? Who's going to cook? How are we going to communicate with each other if the communications channels have gone down? Maybe we all say, if you're in Islington, we'll all be outside the library. If we can't, the people who've been in this leadership team. What are we going to do if there's rioting, or the fascists really come heavy here? Have we got active anti-fascist groups? How do we want to support our community to be well around justice issues? The one that really hurts my heart is, as a mother with two teenage boys, is what if they come around to recruit our boys and our girls, but they'll go for the boys first, I guess, for war. You know, how that's been happening in other places in the world right now, right? So what do we do? How do we resist that together? Okay, so they're things that we can ask. Maybe we'll just have a second and find our toes on the ground again, talking about some heavy stuff. You can sometimes you can just give your body a little wipe. It's a deal to be together to talk about this stuff, right? And it's some part of me can just disappear out of the room actually and go into shutdown. So I want to stay with you. Okay, so there's some scenarios, and then there's some public meetings where we might need to start talking about some of this. People's assemblies, how we're going to meet these times. I'm glad to see what Cooperation Hull are doing, where they're working across the postcodes, running people's assemblies. I'm sure everybody knows here about the Trust the People training that XR are pushing. We are the organisation that ran the Global Assembly, and I believe they're going to toolkit up some things about citizens' assemblies. So there's much coming on deliberative democracy. I think it's also a time where it's valuable if you have the energy to find your way into a parish council. It's often not that hard to find your way on a parish council. They have little bits of power, parish councils, and little bits of money, and that can be a matter in these times. As an example, I talked about food shortages, you know, like the parish council could put some, or cooling centres, they might put some money into a community centre having air source heat pumps fitted that can cool and heat a centre, right? I don't know. They could pay for the metal shed if they think you're not being a crazy prepper with the food in. So that's, and when we're working with people of that nature, councils, etc., we're a bit more in the mainstream, and we have to work at that pace, and that will have its value. There's also a way to meet this in more resistance as well, and it's a both and. So in these times, what's coming and what's already here is people can't afford to pay for things. As the interest rates go up, people are going to struggle with their mortgages and rents. And it's a time. Somebody, yeah? Sorry, I just wondered if somebody was. Bell?
No, Tina's got her microphone on. Tina, is it okay to switch that off? Just because we're recording and.
Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to track it if there was a sort of urgent question. I've got a bit more to say, and then we can sort of hang out together. So yeah, resistance could take the form of non-payment. So non-payment of council tax, park council tax. I won't get into the details of this. Water bill strikes, non-payment of rents, or mortgages. They need a lot of solidarity building and what's called conditional commitments. I think it's a cool idea for like 50 people in a community to not pay £100 of their council tax. Some councils might even let us get away with that. I know of a story in Devon of that, in Somerset, I think, actually. But then you'd have £5,000 to spend, and then you might have a people's assembly. How are you going to spend this in collapse readiness? So we're making the links between civil disobedience, solidarity, people's assemblies, and collapse awareness. I think there's a micro fractal morphic resonance about that feels important to me. In Barcelona, I think it was, in Spain, they had a strong, strikes around not paid mortgages, and people protected each other's houses, and it changed the political situation there. You remember that in Disaster Capitalism, I think Naomi Klein wrote about it. It's that thing where the sort of powers that be, the neoliberals, never let a good crisis go to waste, right? So they can bring yet more disgusting neoliberalism in. Well, what's our version of that, right? There's an opportunity in a crisis, we know that. Okay, so the final bit then is is that the intention is to not just stay in our communities, is to link across the world, peoples to peoples, and to understand people's struggles elsewhere. So we've been living in something of a bubble of privilege, and that's going to go. And maybe we could spend that time linking with family in other parts of the world and understanding their struggles, because they're going to be demonized to us. So we call that global linking. And I mean, I want to mention at the minute in the Sahel, in West Africa, we've had uprisings and governments being overthrown. It will be told in a certain way, like it's a coup, it's a junta, but it's actually backed heavily in many cases by the people, and it's people taking their power back. Well, I won't get into all the stories about that right now, but just to say, for example, in Mali, Ibrahim Traore has said he doesn't recognise colonial debt. That's a real moment. He doesn't recognise colonial debt. If he refuses to pay that debt, that's how degrowth can be pushed on the north. So how are we in relationship to our family that are in resistance elsewhere? We're not at the minute. We're not seeing their struggles. There will tomorrow night be another session I'm running with XR Being the Change on new abolitionism. I'll talk a bit more about this stuff. It's run through the Regenerative Cultures team. We'll be talking about our ancestors and so on. So that's for tomorrow. A bit more on the Sahel then. So I see these times as like holding a line between the anti-life systems that are supporting collapse to happen. Some of it shows up in us, of course it does, but that's not us. That's not humanity. That's not who we are as a people. And the vision of the possibility of breaking together, to use Jen Bendel's book title, of being a human family in these times, of finding our community. It's common for communities to say that the worst times were the best times, you know, of holding out the world we want to create with deliberative democracy, with degrowth economics, the donut universal basic services that ordinary people decide. So these are times that we can be speaking to that and modelling it by. That's why we talk about being the change. Okay, I'm nearly done. I just want to, because that's lots of heavy stuff, I have a couple of quotes just to help us ground, and then we'll do questions and comments and stuff. So the Zapatistas National Liberation Army in 1996 did the declaration of the Lacondan jungle, and they said, many worlds are walked in the world, many worlds are made, many worlds makers. There are worlds that are lies and injustices. There are worlds that are truthful and true. In the world of the powerful, there is only room for the big and their helpers. In the world we want, everybody fits. The world we want is a world in which many worlds fit. Softly and gently we speak the words which find the unity, which will embrace us in history, and which discard the abandonment which confronts and destroys us. Our word, our song, and our cry is so that the dead will no longer die. We fight so they may live. We sing so they may live. And then I wanted to say just a bit more about the emotional side of this, because I've had help with it myself from a medicine woman who I work with, let's say. And yeah, it's when the grief comes and the despair comes, they need to be felt. Yeah, and in certain traditions, like the Quechuan tradition, it's called hucha. It's the negative energies. The earth wants them. The earth composts it On my retreat recently, I actually got sick and the rats ate the sick. That's quite a grim story, but I was like, that's quite viscerally getting my hoocher sorted out. I really did manage to release some really negative things that had come with the menopause. So it was a very strange gift, a tummy bug. But anyway, there is a way to, be with the trees, with the land, and release the feelings, offer it back to the earth. The earth wants it. So I'm told in many traditions that's how it is. And part of it is not to get stuck in those feelings and with the burden of the weight of the world on our shoulders and our communities. Like, we have to find the lightness in this as well, right? And the way you do that is you have to return to the beauty. What's beautiful around you? Where are the people that you love? Where's the nature that you love? What resources you like? I got such a big download about this in 2019 in the winter solstice from life saying, life wants to live through us. We're here to be alive together. It's not a time to feel the burden of this, like there's a hubris in feeling too burdened by this. We can just do what we can do and walk it together, right? So I will then finish with this quote I love from Teokos in Ghost Horse. He said, "This is the hardest time to live, but it is also the greatest honour to be alive now and to be allowed to see this time. There is no other time like now. We should be thankful, for creation did not make weak spirits to live during this time. The old ones say, this is the time when the strongest spirits will live through, and those who are empty shells, those who have lost the connection, will not survive. We have become masters of survival. We will survive. It is our prophecy to do so." And I really hear that as we're here to do this together. And as I say it to young ones especially, I've already said it wasn't okay what was happening. Change is coming, as Greta said, whether you like it or not, and we get to be part of that change and make it happen. So I think it's cool in a really strange way. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gail. I'd love to open the floor to questions, comments, reflections, and sharings now, really. So if anyone has any one of those, if they can just use the reaction key to put your hand up, I can come to you. Ooh, thank you. Okay, I will start with just, it seems to the way it's come up on my screen, is Ben.
Can I just say as well, just to emphasise, it's fine for questions. It's fine for other people than me to answer questions, but comments are also fine. Like, you might not have a question. We've all got our collective intelligence here. Thank you.
Yeah, Ben.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Gail. Thanks for that. So my question is around having one foot in the today and waking up every day and, in the world of today, the capitalist system that we're all stuck in, doing the things we're stuck doing, and having the other foot in the world of collapse where we know what's coming and we almost can't quite believe it. We kind of can't quite believe it, but we kind of know it. And trying to exist in two worlds at the same time without giving yourself over to the current world and just kind of not giving up, but just I'll just have fun and go do that. But at the same time, not necessarily going into the collapse world and sort of spending your time in that. What would your advice, and others, anyone on the call, of course, what would people's advice be about well, I feel I'm living in two different worlds, and I struggle very much to deal with that dichotomy.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And I, see some other people resonating with that. Um, I think the first thing I would say is see that as a blessing, because you're. I talk about the anti-life systems, and you're feeling yourself not fully really a part of them. I suppose maybe I'm thinking out loud here, but there's some way of fully separating from them as best you can. I'm not necessarily talking practically here. I'm still going to go to the supermarket probably. I'm talking about you're walking a different walk to what this system wants of you, and that's kind of like it feels surreal at times, and I think that's why it's important to have support. I talked about chuddles, but be with other people, because it's not weird. It's the time that we're in. And then I guess it depends what feeling each brings, because when you sort of talk about collapse, like if that feels like shit, I'm supposed to then run around buying tins of beans or whatever it brings up for you, like that's with each piece, what are the emotions that come up? What's the feeling in your body? What are the needs, and what's wanting to be heard? The guidebook for this really is Hospice in Modernity. I heard the question about the books in the chat. So Hospice in Modernity, Vanessa Mercado de Olivieri, she's sort of walking you through some of this. I mentioned At Work in the Ruins, Dougal Hine, again holding something, and then the third one is Jen Bendel's. That's more sort of political, I would say, but you're breaking together. I guess I'd sort of want to get under the hood of the question a bit more as well, Ben. Like, what's the, like with the Matrix when he's in. I sort of picturing that in a way. Like, how do you sort of create an image for yourself about how that is? Like, I'm going back on jury trial on Monday, and to say, if it's okay to say, it's probably a path to a jail, right? I mean, it's crazy, it's so stupid, but I have just gone into that courtroom enough times now with this judge that it just feels like ridiculous cosplay. In fact, I wrote that in a submission once. It's just ridiculous cosplay with his daft wigs on and the gowns, doing something, not doing justice, doing that system. And I'm just in there for something else, I'm not sure I'm fully meeting your question, but in a way, maybe that's part of it, isn't it? It's like, how do we do this? Like, that is the inquiry that we're all in. And all I think as well is, like, I don't know if you were here for the start, but I was talking about different ways to be well, collectively and individually. And with that, it's always one foot in front of the other, isn't it? And seeing what you need. Yeah, thanks.
Well, thank you for that. And I've literally just started hospicing for maternity, so hospicing maternity. So I will get into that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ben. Yeah, your question made me, I mean, like I think all of us feel as if we're stuck between worlds. I have a daughter, and she sometimes wants to go and walk around the shops, and that's one world, and for a while I saw that as a holiday, like, okay, for an hour and a half with my daughter, I'm going to pretend everything's okay and we're just going to walk around the shops. It's become really difficult actually after this summer, because everything seems like a facade. But I think in the war as well, even for soldiers, they would be on the front and then they'd come back for leave and sit and have tea with their family and then have to go back out onto the front. It must have been utterly bewildering, but it's such an accurate reflection of our time. We are literally between worlds. Alex, you were next up. I'd love, yeah.
I mean, yeah, so my comment sort of follows on from that, really. I think the thing I've just been sort of thinking these last few days is, isn't it so strange that you can almost imagine, in a time when we were perhaps you know, living in small tribes, maybe 100 people, you know, kind of, or less, then, you know, the wise people would notice or would be aware of any sort of troubles coming, you know, and you can imagine that they'd be able to sort of tell the rest of the tribe and they'd act accordingly. I think what's really sort of strange here is that, you know, like probably for sort of 5 years, ever since the Extinction Rebellion sort of first made the media, you know, it got me sort of investigating, and I, you know, sort of soon realized where we were headed, but I don't have anyone within my family that I can talk to about it. And it's really weird, even though I have that kind of what I see wisdom, I almost don't want to share it with them, or I don't feel I can. It's almost like they've got this idea of their world and where it's going, and I feel like I can't sort of you know, like shatter their illusions or anything. It's really weird. And yet, you know, I've got, you know, like my mum concerned about whether I'm sort of paying into a pension scheme or whatever it might be. And it's like, I don't know, it's just the strangest time that having this wisdom, but feeling like you can't actually really kind of wake other people up unless they're prepared to sort of shift themselves, right? And I don't know, it's really weird. I don't know what other people think in terms of, you know, it's that split reality, but it's also, you know, living in two worlds, but it's also feeling that you should sort of try and make people see where we're headed and, you know, kind of get them to do their own research, but at the same time, not wanting to, and not like, how do you really persuade someone to sort of deep dive climate change and everything else that comes with it? So yeah, it's just my sort of, my thoughts really. Without any real question in there.
No, but thanks, Alex, because it does remind me to say a few other things. I mean, I do think we're the pioneers, going back to Ben's question as well, that, you know, you talked about the wise ones, like, we're it, folks. So, like, funny, isn't it? Like, the best advice I ever had was to really step into the big part of myself, as well as knowing that there's a little bit that also needs to fall to pieces at times, you know, but to be in that, embody that person that you can feel yourself to be, you know. With our family, I mean, yeah, I think we've all got a version of that one way or another. There is some Australian research that 30% of the population, I think she called them differentists, and they're the people that are subject to authoritarian messaging. And they just sort of, as I understood the research anyway, they can't really cope with hard stuff. They don't want to know. They're just, you know, the way what modern politics have done. Nancy McLean, Democracy in Chains, if you want the details on it. But trying to get those people just to give up. They'll just vote for something stupid, or not, you know. But there's some place of just, they just want to be with their family and in their communities. They don't want anything too difficult, right? So whoever looks like they can be in charge. I think there is a need for us to give the message that we've got this as best we can. Of course, we could do with some more help, right? But because otherwise, you know, the way collapse will go is that there'll be another strong message that we've got this, coming from kind of an eco-fascistic surveillance capitalism model, right? So we're going to have to be the ones that say we've got this. In terms of having those sort of courageous conversations, I mean, about climate, it is a question of who's ready to listen, isn't it, and think about it. But the larger us are doing some practice stuff through Parents for Future on that stuff and a few other groups. There's also something that you can tap into right now. It's called theweek.000. Theweek.000. They've never really tried to push it through climate networks because they want it to go through ordinary stuff first. But it's all set up for a small group, 2 to 3 to 7 people, whatever, parents, families, your rugby club, whatever, to be together, and you get 3 different films over the course of the week. It's very powerful, actually. So you don't have to work it out. You can invite somebody to do the week with you, if you think there's any chance they will. Mum, you know when you're on about that pension thing, will you do this? See if you get 1 or 2 of them. Anyway,
Okay.
there you go.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Alex. And it's a very, very familiar. Yeah, I've got family members who they'll even say they get it, but they're not acting out of with any concern or any urgency. So we get it, as if, yeah, so it must be very familiar to lots of us. The next person up on my screen was Gordon. Gordon?
Try unmuting myself first.
Thank you.
I really admire you, Gail, because you've got such incisive analysis. I was thinking when climate centres first started coming up, for me, was just in the last couple of weeks. I thought, well, why do we need so close to home? And you just put it together in just a few words. And it reminds me, I was talking to Robin, that bundle of energy in London. She was going on about, we've got to get the working man together. We've got to get them to face what's happening in front of them because they can't see any further. And this fits in with it completely. Getting community centres going and being there in advance, ready for the collapse to happen. Yeah, I'm with you all the way. Until tonight, I was saying we've got to get the secondary school kids out. But I reckon if you can get the community out, the secondary school kids may get out of their mental dilemma that they've got at the moment. So yeah, letting people see what's going on right in front of their faces. We've got to get that message across and get so many people out to join us. So yeah, we're here really for not so much for climate collapse as civilization collapse, or the cost of living collapse, all that sort of stuff, and be out there locally. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Gordon, because I think I didn't say so much about the resistance side of it. Like, that's where this meets everybody's everyday concerns. Like the stuff around water bills maybe is a bit more of it, in quotes, middle class concern, or the stuff around non-payment of council tax to put it into a pot. That's could be a bit more resource people doing that. But things like energy bills and rent, like people are just gonna really struggle with that. Are now, but it's some. So there are sort of tools and techniques to organise. I mean, dear old Roger Allen, when I first met him, was doing what we call conditional commitment in a tower block, where he was getting people to say, would you not pay the rent rise if everybody else joined you? And he just went around with a clipboard, right? I was talking to Housing Rebellion people about this recently. Like it maybe each community has more of a flavour. I don't know, is Islington a bit posh? I honestly don't know, but I know London well. But it may be that like Thames Water's the one to go after and model something. But I think there is an element of this that's like a non-payment strike at some point. And it's that thing when we say get the message across, kind of I really understand that, and it's also this. Sometimes that's got a bit of a push energy, isn't it? You're trying to get people to face something, and then you want them to do something. But also, it's kind of like catching something when the moment happens. Like the water thing's been building. Last year, it was the energy bills, and Don't Pay were ready for it pretty much, and they won before they'd launched. So there's energy there. It's just sometimes it's not. You've got to find the zeitgeist, haven't you? I think that's going to be important. What's going to be our thing in our community? Thank you.
And we've got to resist the divide and conquer that they do.
Very much so. Thank you, Gordon. Very much so. And then the next question or comment is from Ruth.
Oh, yeah. Oh, how do I lower my hand? There we go. I actually put my hand up because I saw that 4 men put their hands up, and I realized we were falling into the same pattern that we always do, where women go quiet and men step in. And I was trying to change that, but it's all of us have got to change that. Yeah. Lots of things have been coming up for me as people have been talking. I certainly have the two worlds thing. But I find that when I talk with people who are not climate active, and a lot of my world is not climate active, they're feeling collapse in some way. They may not feel it specifically as climate, but they're feeling some kind of collapse. And if you kind of sit with them instead of trying to impose their own perception of what the collapse is, that you can have a conversation and a sharing of what that experience is for each of us, and it kind of, yeah, I find that quite helpful. I also think I was talking to Kitty earlier, who's here as well, and we were talking about Israel and Gaza and the trauma that Israelis carry, and how that gets acted out. And she was talking about a session that she had once in India, where this guy who'd been an Israeli soldier, because they all get conscripted, where they had a ceremony, and he went into a trauma state, but the trauma state of the guilt and the shame and the horror of what he'd had to do as an Israeli soldier, and he couldn't process that, and sort of realizing, you know, what we're asking of ourselves here by sharing and being collapse aware, and what we're asking other people to step into, because everybody's feeling it, but staying in that is that place where that Israeli soldier was when they're facing it, and we have to have the resources to do that, the holding to do that. Yeah. Something else came up for me because Gail was talking about, I've got 2 teenagers as well. And I have this horrible thing, so I've got a daughter and a son, and I'm sort of thankful my son has autism and ADHD and a language disorder, so he probably wouldn't get called up. And that has crossed my mind. Yeah, but one of the things that's been coming up for me is just how much violence they're going to see. You know, they're not. Yeah. And I speak to other people who say they're training their children, they're teaching their children martial arts and fighting skills and things. And I just can't, I don't want my children to live in a world like that, but is that my choice to make? I don't know. But then another thing that someone shared earlier was an Instagram of a comedian who was talking about her parenting. She said, I've got children who are Gen Z, and that's the last generation because it's the final letter. And what do we, you know, and we're bringing them going, oh yes, well, you know, there's an ocean of plastic over there, and there's a world war about to start over here, and a pandemic, and there's AI, but do your homework because it's really important. And that's the 2 worlds that we're living in, isn't it? It's how and how are we parenting our children? That kind of slightly schizophrenic perspective on the world to our kids, and what does that mean? Anyway, that was me.
Shift.
Thanks so much, Ruth. So much of that resonated. It's a absolutely bonkers time to be a parent, in so many ways. Before I move on to Jackie and then Paul, Liz, I don't know if you could turn off your microphone, just because there's a lot of sort of feedback coming your way, Liz, if that's okay. I didn't catch that. Okay, let's move on to Jackie. Did you have a comment or a reflection, please?
Thank you. Yeah, it was really just a comment. Thank you so much for having these conversations, because I completely, with everybody else, Ben, you know, it's living 2 worlds. That's why I quite often say to people, I feel like, you know, all this stuff, and yet what you see all around you is people just carrying on as usual, and also other, you know, with family, and my children are older, sort of 20s and 30, and I just don't know what to say to them. They know what I do, but I just don't know what to say to them about the future. They have plans and say the things they want to do, and people in my family start saying, oh, you're going to get married, you have a baby, are you looking forward to being a grandparent? And I just find it really, really hard. So thank you for holding this space. I just wanted to say that, really. I'm just so grateful. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. I really hear you. You know, one of the things I worked out to do a while ago, because I'd sort of find myself, you know, like it'd be one of the kids having their friends were having a birthday party, and I'd be stood with other parents, and I'm like, and they're just talking in that way that it's the cognitive dissonance is just too strong. And what I've worked out to say is, something like, you know what, I'm a climate activist, or whatever word's better than that anyway, but you know what I mean. And I spend quite a lot of my time looking at the sixth mass extinction event that we're in, and climate breakdown and the collapse of civilization. And I just find interactions like this quite hard to be in. I find them a bit, I end up feeling quite alienated, because what my understanding of reality is not always reflected in, and I just name it. I don't try and make them bad in any way, or them need to hear me, or them need to say what they're doing, or whatever. I just name that feeling of alienation and weirdness that's going off in me, so that I don't, because otherwise, like, you have to absorb it all, and they're just like yap yap yap, and you're like, ah. So I
Yeah.
just say it, and then I'm sharing that dilemma with them. They don't have to then, they can do what they want with it. They can change the subject, they can meet it, they can ask me more about, but I've just put it in there, so it's just not mine to hold in that space alone. So yeah,
Thank you. That's that's really helpful.
it's,
Really
and
helpful.
it's, do you know what, and it is that thing, like, people aren't always, you know, I do have some compassion. Not everybody's able to, people know, right? I mean, I don't know if people know here that some people just got off on the jury trial, because we can't tell everybody about it yet because of reporting restrictions, but you might have heard one of the kind of iconic actions of XR, people got off, right? They're making damn sure I'm not going to, that's off the back of that, but anyway, fuck 'em. So why did I mention that? Because ordinary people get it, you know, and they don't. And I think one of the things is agency, isn't it? Like, it's all very well knowing about something. The week is that I mentioned earlier, the week.000 is very helpful, because the first thing is, like, let's really face this together. And what people have said is, that was that was brutal. Thank you. Like, they were ready for that level. And then the sort of arc of it is like, why are we here? And it takes you from the story of more and what's driving modernity, and then what's mine to do. So it gives people a, like, so there's different stories in the week around people who are activists, you know, on the streets, or they've joined the council, they're getting a farm together, or they're taking legal cases, whatever. Just different people to relate to, and different channels for what might be yours to do. And it's really a way, I don't know if you've had this as well, when people say thank you for doing that for all of us. And I'm thinking, and quite often say, I'm not doing it for you, you're an adult. I'm doing it for your kids, I'm doing it for my kid. But another adult, I'm not this, like, I can't do it because I can't carry that much. Like, you've got to do it for yourself. And like, unless they were like, you know, disabled people against cuts, or, you know, whatever, doing their thing that needs to be done as well, like, then it's solidarity, isn't it? But like, I can't be doing it for you unless they're really like care, you know, heavily involved in some care. So I don't mean to be judging, but you know, that sort of, like, I'm just getting off on my skiing holiday while you go. Anyway, you know what that's like as well.
Totally
So I
right.
went off on a bit of a rant, but the week is helpful for that, you know, as well, for what's ours to do in this. Yeah, I think I had something else to say, but it's gone.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jackie. I get the same feeling sometimes when my daughter asks me what she thinks I should do, what she thinks she should do as her career, and I never quite know what to say. And she's so full of hope about all the beautiful, magical things she thinks she can do. Yeah, and there was something else, but I'd like to move the next Paul. You had some thoughts and.
Yeah, it's some. I just want to thank Ruth actually, because I wasn't going to put my hand up until till somebody from the other sex put their hand up, because it does happen that way, and I think it's I could feel every urge in my body to want to say something. It's really interesting, but I managed to hold back, and then thankfully Ruth and Jackie came through with some very erudite comments and moving comments. And thanks to Gail, there's so much come up for me. What you were saying, Gail, and the sort of general things that I'm really realizing the importance of looking after ourselves and our own well-being. That came through very strongly for me what you said, but also this idea of joy in things, and you're finding joy in things because they are there, and that's what nourishes, and that's what helps us connect better. And with that, a personal thing about just having a sense of humor. I mean, listen to Joanna Macy at the age of 94 saying, what a time to be alive. This isn't, I wouldn't miss this for anything. We're here, nobody else is going to be here, are they, at this moment in time, and really to kind of celebrate that. And that gives us the energy to do these things. So that, I found that really inspiring, actually, just to register down this doing it because it's the right thing to do. And wherever actions we take amplify, and the ripples where they go, we don't know where. And it's only when I fell into this trap when I got into activism of getting disappointed very quickly and then eventually burning out. And I needed somebody else to point that out to me, bearing in mind a lot of my work's around resilience. So those are all incredibly helpful, and I think they're really important. And the other thing that came through to me is this idea of being in two worlds. And I used to have a postcard of all these men in suits swimming upstream, and then this one person coming the other way, gegen den Strom, against the stream. And I've been in those positions. I'm 70 next year. I've been in those positions all of my life. I've spent many, many, many years with the enemy in corporations, and doing a lot of learning and development and coaching work, and always feeling as in a liminal area that I wasn't really meant to be there, but finding myself very often, I still do it now, sticking up for people, in the grind culture, because there are a lot of good people there, and it's really easy to demonize everybody. And I ended up working in sustainability, but even then, when I heard Claire Farrell in 2019 deliver the science, I thought, I can't do this anymore. I can't work as a consultant, even if I was going in around sustainability. And so I did it overnight, thanks again to Joanna Macy's work. I kind of became an activist. And then for 4 years, made all sorts of mistakes of othering people, having a great time as well. And Claire mentioned trust the people. And then I went, oh my goodness, I have to do this. And I remember about the third session in, actually going down to the house of somebody in my village and said, I really would like to do something in my local village. Okay. And I'm not realizing just how hard, she said, well, Paul, those are few of us in the village who know you, think you're a very nice guy, but the stuff that you post, have been posting for 4 years on the e-chat, they hate you. And I was always wondering why people never responded to what I put there, and just ranting and raving. And a lesson I thought I knew was I relearned about meeting people where they are. And even my first parish council meeting, I walked in and I thought it was a simple request. Why don't we declare a climate emergency? And a parish councillor literally fell off his chair and declared me of being responsible for damaging the mental health of the young people in the village by these scare stories, and that Greta Thunberg's going around telling everybody they're going to be dead in 6 weeks. And all the time again, I thought I got to meet with them where they are, and what the tool I've got, and it's what I'm best at it is helping people understand the benefits of self-awareness through meditation. So, but however you couch that, as relaxation or whatever, but both in business and now increasingly in the village, as people are beginning to trust a little bit and beginning to slow down and become still, it opens a little space for them, the easy messages to us to come through. Why not care a little bit about the village, about nature, and just really little small steps to, not just going in with a big declaration, we're all going to die, or what they perceive to be, but first step is just trying to get any engagement, and then through that trust and connection. I'm not there yet. I'm way from there, but a few weeks ago we had a nature day in the parish hall, and loads of kids came, and they were so enthusiastic about it. And then the parents go, okay, well, maybe we should have a white flower garden, and we should be protecting the hedgehogs. That's a big thing in the village now. And I find it's the only way, that, okay, I'll still go on the demos and things like that. But, that for me is that just gently coaxing people in, and then helping find a platform or a bridge for the messages. So again, thanks, Gail, because it's helped me kind of realize in order to do that, looking after yourself and your own well-being and being strong and kind and loving and joyful and funny whilst you're doing it as well.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I find that quite sweet and funny, the idea of being a miserable old sod in a WhatsApp chat or whatever, the village chat channel. Yes, and nobody's. Yeah, we've all done that, haven't we? There's yet another brilliant book called The Entangled Activist, by the way, isn't there? I don't know if you've come across that, but I just wanted to mention Mary Reynolds' work, if people know about that. It's We Are the Ark, Mary Reynolds, and it's about Ark is an act of restorative kindness, and it's about giving bits of your garden back to nature and how to do that well. So she's got lots online. She was a garden designer. She's a recovering gardener, she says. So it's nice stuff for the village, right? And there's also a lovely film about her winning the Chelsea Flowers show called Dare to be Wild. If you want a nice Friday night heartwarming film to watch, Dare to be Wild, about Mary Reynolds' life. But I actually think that what I said before, where do you have some agency? Like, well, we could have nature thrive in our village. We could be an ark, not just gardens, but the village could be an ark for nature. Like, everybody claims that they love nature. And it turns out quite a bit of the flowers that get sold at the RHS for pollinators aren't the best ones to. That's not really what nature wants. It's a bit like putting a load of sugar out for kids or whatever, you know. Anyway, and I love the thing about humour, Paul, because I'm sure you know that I'm a bit obsessed with McGilchrist's work and the hemispheres and that. And having been like quite a fairly miserable menopausal woman recent until this retreat recently, the right hemisphere is the seat of humour and playfulness, and when we're not in it, it's telling us something. When we've lost our sense of playfulness and humour, like you can stand on one leg with your eyes closed. Apparently, that helps with the balance. But there's more to do. And then with people in the workplace, by the way, Tessa Vernick's work on undercover activism within the workplace, you know, for people who are still connected in with people who are in that side of incorporations. There's and that's part of what comes out in the week as well, what you can do within your workplace. I guess I sort of imagine, in my biggest dream, we've sowed these, this is the Bacano too, we've sowed these little seeds, and then suddenly people get it, that it's down to us, and every bit of carbon captured in the body of nature is going to matter, and every food production that we can do, and every way that we can connect with each other is going to matter, and they all jump in and do it, like, and we'd be there because we've sowed some seeds, right? So, like, let's see, islands of sanctuary, sanctity, and sanity. Thank you.
Thanks so much. We've got two more, Julia and Rachel. Julia, would you like to speak?
Well, none of my comments make sense after that amazing things you've just been saying, Gail. Anyway, I'm going to say it now anyway. I love the idea of the activism in the workplace, though. I am currently a teacher, primary school teacher, and my colleagues, the science lead, the outdoor learning lead, think it's just weather. So I'm going to look at that book. That will be useful. One thing that cropped up earlier, I think both you, Gail, and Paul were talking about how lucky we are to be alive now. And I know we should think that, but don't you just all think, imagine if we could nip back to the 19th century for a second and see the birds, the flowers, a different sort of normal. That would be lovely, wouldn't it? Anyway, we're here. So that is good. And then the thing I wanted to say, actually, Gail, I loved what a practical thing you said. I just thought how boring parish councils seem. I used to think how boring local councils were. And then I finally realised when I started sort of leafleting for the Green Party that it's local councils have the money. And now you say parish councils have money too. That's really, or a little bit, tiny bit. That's just so useful to know. So thank you. I'm going to scurry that information away. And yeah, because we need to go where some budget is sometimes to work with that, don't we? That's really positive. Thank you.
I might say just also the power to make decisions. So my friend did this sort of guerrilla move one time, which is not particularly in her nature. It was quite sweet, but she just took it upon herself to make bus stop, really beautiful, and put like a little sofa in it and pictures, and the council just didn't know how to be with it, because they were like, is this an act of vandalism? But it's nicer than it was, you know. And yeah, eventually, and it sort of became a news story, and eventually she sort of came out and said it was me. She's now on the parish council, is and reading Flat Pack Democracy and so on. So I don't think they've got loads of power or money, but they have some, and some of the micro details are going to matter. Like, where are we going to go? And you know, where did we go when the pandemic happened? It's the close neighbours, isn't it? So yeah, I think it's a place of focus. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you, Juliet. Just one reflection of I've written down here the profound content, I don't know, in being with others who understand. I'm feeling very happy in this group. I'll pass to Rachel.
After all this poetry, I feel I'm being a bit pragmatic here. I find myself torn in about 7 different directions in terms of the work that I do at the moment. It's all climate related, resilience related. Some is in schools, some is with writing articles for local groups, some is climate emergency work. And at the moment, I've had to step back from it all for personal reasons for 4 months and give myself a bit of time to think. But what advice would you give on how do I choose? How do I best choose where to focus my efforts? Because I think previously I was spread far too thinly. There's my local community, which is a village, my nearest community, which is a town. There's all the other villages in the county and the next county where I go to schools. How do you choose which of these things to do to make the most difference?
Yeah. Thanks, Rachel. Part of me in even in that question wants to just pause, like with your 4 months off, like, because isn't there that urging us to find the right thing and have an answer? And that's sort of it's part of the systems, actually. It's like, what I mean by it's part of the systems, the anti-life systems, because there's always there's a phrase, internalized capitalism. We've got to be productive, right? Well, sure, like, but maybe we, how do we know that what we're doing's having the most impact, or it's the best thing to be doing, or whatever, like, and we're so busy doing it. So that place where we get into extracting from ourselves. I often, or quite fairly often, say to activists, like, this earth that you're protecting and want to save, it starts here in your body. Like, where are you saving that? Like, where are you taking care of that? Where are you extracting from it? And so on. So it's just really good to notice, like, where the pushes and pulls come from. I mean, there are great coaches out there, aren't there? I've worked with this guy, Charlie from Clarity, howtobeclear.com. It's helpful to get clear on there's some practices there. There are, coaches that use constellation work, and that was helpful to me recently as well. But because it's that thing, isn't it, of where we feel most joy, where our capacities are strongest, where we have the most, where our skills fit. But there's that kind of analysis you can do on it. But I think what Charlie said in coaching, he said usually there's a tension in your body where you've already said yes to something, and you kind of have to stop back and see, are you still saying yes to it, and so that I feel like there's a tension that says I am here to do something, and then it's working out what it is, right? So it's kind of look at what's already on the table, and you can take each one and ask, is that still mine to do? Like, I think you're in that process. My way, at least better me, is to pray for guidance, from life and ask to give it over, like, you know, however that is, you know, in your, I don't know anything about your spirituality or whatever, but language you want to use, but it's kind of like, even on the science front now, there's the cosmic hologram, there's the informational one might think of the Akashic record or whatever, but there's the possibility that there is a consciousness, let's put it like that, and that it might not all be, it might want something from us, it might just not be for our left hemisphere to work it out. So, like, yeah, before I go on any of these horrendous right-wing, I avoid them these days, they're awful, but, you know, radio interviews, I've always prayed for life to speak through me, you know, rather than try and, I've got a few notes about what I might say, but and I had the pleasure of being friends with Polly Higgins, and she used to decide what it is they needed and put it on a post-it note and let the universe know. I needed a man a few years ago, and I asked everybody out pretty much. I made some prayers as well. It worked out really well. But I'm embarrassed saying that, actually, now. He could be online with us, he's probably not. I think what I'm really trying to say is there's a depth to this that there doesn't have to be in the head, that's like an offering for all of us to be with, of the service, isn't there? And sometimes when you make that prayer and that offering, it'll come. Just wait a little bit. Like, don't always be in the next. You've done a lot of service, Rachel, clearly, you know. It's good to take the foot off the gas, because this is what I was saying earlier about this is the regenerative cultures, like, it's this stuff, isn't it?
I feel I should say that it's not a good reason why I'm taking months out. My husband's very ill.
Oh, I'm sorry
So
to hear that. Yeah.
we're fielding, but well, no, I didn't want to say that particularly, but it's not a conscious decision to take time off and rethink, but it has made me start thinking, well, actually, I will spread too thinly, and I need to focus on something or something and do less. But yes, let the answer come, I think, is good advice.
And may you be well, and also therefore there's gifts in all the bad situations that come, aren't there? There's often a gift in it somewhere. So yeah, good luck, blessings.
Thanks, Gail. Thank you. I'm just going to say that, and I'm very aware, Gail, that you may want to finish at 8 on the dot, given the situation that you're in. But I do have this Zoom call till 8:30, or if you wish to let it go a bit longer. I'm just going to pass to Bob as well now. Oh, Gail, if you had any thoughts on timing, that would be great, actually.
I mean, I feel like I have a feeling we're coming to a natural end here. So let's hear from Bob and Kit, and then maybe we'll be done, you know.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Bob?
Hi. Hi, everyone. I just want to say at the start that I feel it's a real privilege to be here in such a small, intimate setting with Gail. And Gail, I just so admire your serenity and equanimity going into this second trial on Monday. I want to send you, I'm sure everyone else does, our love and support for you. I'd like to tell you about something that a very inspiring colleague at Kingston Hive is doing in preparation. Her name is Danielle O'Shaughnessy, and she's very connected with all sorts of civil society groups around Kingston, as well as with councillors and people working in the council. And her idea is, we in Kingston are facing a number of threats: possible flooding, food price rising, extreme heat, extreme cold, and smoke from nearby fires. And she's got a few of us in groups of 2 to look at each of those things. And we've started to do that. But the interesting and amazing thing is that the government places an obligation on every single local authority to involve civil society in planning for these things. And there's a bit happening across London, but in Kingston, we cannot even get to talk to the person who's responsible for this. So it may be that we go ahead and do something ourselves across civil society in 3 different ways. One is building up networks of mutual aid. And then for each of those threats, suggesting to vulnerable groups what they should do right now to prepare. And also making plans for how we can support if those things come. And I think that would be an amazing thing for all of us to be doing all around this country. This comes from this amazing woman, Danielle. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bob.
Thanks, Bob. I'm glad somebody else is thinking about that and has some knowledge. Bye, Ruth, by the way. Lots of love. Thanks for helping this happen. Yeah, if you put us in touch and include yourself, that would be great. But do let her know that I might actually be offline for some months, but I'd be interested to connect with her. She's obviously thinking on similar lines, so thank you.
Thank you. And Kit?
Thank you very much. Hello. Excuse me. Just absolutely. I'm on the call. I'm sure I'm not alone. I've been joyful and very close to tears with what I've been hearing. Now, the reason for the question is Bob just now put it so well, and also I'm just quickly thinking back to what you were saying with Rachel a moment ago, and I have 2 lines here. The task is ours, the weight is God, and I feel there's much that we can be doing, and Bob was just expressing some, and Gordon as well, and Paul too, just to bring their names in, and Rachel. The task, I think, is my own beginning with my church and Eco Church. This will be a question, and also the road in which I live. And really, my question is, what are the thoughts and tips to bring in to ignite people? We've had recently in the road, as I'm sure others have had over the last year, this year, street parties, and that sort of like brings together. Everyone's jolly. We're talking about the 2 ways of living, and that is that's a moment to meet and greet and try to get you to know your neighbours or your neighbours further down the road or street. But what happens then? And I'm just really looking for instances where we can ignite. I think it was Paul was talking about meeting people where they are, and it's probably just finding a question that you can lift to get an engagement and a conversation started. And then I think perhaps possibly somebody else mentioned, or you, Gail, mentioned films, a set of films. We are doing that in our XR group in Dorking, Reigate and Redhill, and that's a way in which maybe even Eco Church can also bring in a new audience. So my question really is: do you have experience, or others have experience of what works, and most importantly, I think what clearly hasn't worked, and therefore is a waste of energy and time? So those would be the tasks that I feel I should attempt. But I must also, through prayer, leave the weight of it to God. Thank you.
Thank you, Kit. Thank you for putting that so beautifully. The tasks are ours and the weight of it's God's. So I appreciate that. And also, yeah, the tears that wanted to come, I just wanted to hold them a little bit more. Like they're more valuable in these spaces than the words, I think. I put the week back in the chat, by the way. I the sort of standard answer is like listening to people, isn't it? It's like listen to what their concerns are and so on. That can be a bit of a route to talking about dog poo, potholes, cost of living crisis, and you know what happened in Cooperation Hull is people started saying the problem was the immigrants, you know. So that has its limitations, I think, just to go purely like as if you're like the parent to fix things and ask what people are struggling with. And then it's also like how we find our answers together, because so much of it's systemic, isn't it? Like, you know, if people are struggling to pay the bills, there is an interesting body of work getting going in Stroud that I'm a bit on the edge of. You can't get involved in everything, but that's looking at commoning, how we sort of own things in common. And the people organising that, there's a guy, Dills, that's been, I think he's based in Brixton actually, Dave Darby here and others, but they've been looking at that whole question around finance, because that's always a sticking point, doesn't it? Came up early. Well, where does the money come from? When it's not all about money at all, but in fact, the Zapatistas famously say you can't solve money problems with more money. But anyway, I'm getting tired now, so I'm rambling. In the commoning approach, they are trying to collectively get enough money together, but then you issue people with future rental agreements or future use of a community hall or whatever. So they're people that come from the alternative currency situation. So I think it's good to have some ideas up your sleeve, like for like what's helped elsewhere, which is why I sort of mentioned Mary Reynolds' work and the stuff that comes through the week, the commonings, one of them. But I think really in a way the whole meeting's been in part in answer to that, Kit, and so I suppose like it feels to come back round to you, like you got mentioned in the chat as a I think as a key person in your group. I think somebody said, did they, XR? Yeah, for holding it together. And I bet you've got bags of inspiration, a lifetime's worth of it, and especially if you open up the channel to the divine, that maybe less what you need is tips and information. And I mean, we will go away and work on some toolkits at some time, do you know what I mean? It's not that, but I have a sense that maybe that's less what you need and more what you need to keep that channel open, and the guidance, you know, that you're feeling, and with true spirit.
Thank you. To say that I think also it is to be braver, to take the risks, to start that conversation. And during this call, my mobile's gone off, because we do in our road have a WhatsApp group, and some fireworks went off, and almost within a moment's minute, several people came on the WhatsApp saying, what's going on? My cat's going wild, and this is so unfair. so with that level of attention and reaction to one firework, we can concentrate on the bigger fireworks. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I hear you about the courage, that's part of our culture, isn't it? Is to keep us behaving, and especially in social situations. I think that's probably a strong thread of what's been here today, isn't it? It's like, how do you navigate? And I just do feel like just that simple answer of saying listening, that there's some challenge to make, which isn't maybe, as Paul was graciously describing about himself earlier, just laying it on thick. I'm sure you were more graceful than that, Paul, actually, but you know what I mean, doing the misery trip on everybody. there's a path to walk to find together on this, isn't there? Where we're both courageous and human, humorous, and not being the ones that just have to hold and absorb. And I think we all have to find our way with it. It's going to be different with my uncle Ernie and Steve or whoever, and parents and friends, and it's all different, isn't it? And each village is different, each location. But I do think to keep talking to other people and naming these struggles we have. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
I kind of think I'm cooked, more or less, just to say, because I'm getting a bit.
Sure, Gail. I was just going to say, if you had any last thoughts, that would be great. But you've just given us so much to mull over. I had a list of questions, and to be honest, you answered everyone anyway during what you were saying. So thank you. Did you want to say anything else, or?
I mean, I'm just thinking of those that are here that haven't said anything. I also think it's nice to just go round to those that have been silent, and not to demand any words, but if there's, just to ask. So I think there's Farah and Lizzie and Tina and Joe, Alison, maybe. There may be more in the background, but just if there's anything that wants to be said, or close. They're all coming out of the woodwork now, aren't they?
In there. Oh, somebody else is jumping in. I'm jumping in. Oh, we're unmuting. We're unmuting. We've unmuted. We're unmute, aren't we?
You're here, yeah.
You are. So
Hi. Really.
Oh, hello.
We've got a really crappy internet connection, so we've been blind to you lot all the whole time. But just wanted to say hello. This is Tanya. I'm Leo. And hi. And it's been very, very lovely. We're not big on God, but whatever pushes your XR boat or whatever it is that out there.
I talk about the intelligence of life, actually, if that would make sense to you. That's what that's a way of feeling it. But whatever, that's another for a day.
Thank you so much for being here. Tina, would you like some words?
Well, it was partly in response to what Rachel said, and it's partly a thank you for Gail. I was very ill at New Year and had gone deaf overnight. But one thing I was able to do was to listen to podcasts. If I held this up to my ear, so it's Bluetooth, and I listened to Gail's interview with Manda Scott, and that set me listening to lots more of Manda Scott's Accidental God podcast, and actually enrolling on the membership program. So Rachel, it was just to say I was forced, really, through being ill. All I was doing was jigsaws when I got a bit better, to take the time and start exploring something I would never have looked at otherwise. And to thank Gail for doing that interview so that I came in contact with Manda. It's been a really important part of my life since Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. And Lizzie?
Yeah. Yeah, just massive thanks. I've just sat here in silence and felt deeply moved, and I've resonated with some of the stuff about, there's so much one could do, and I've suddenly found a bit like Rachel, suddenly found myself involved in probably too many things for my own good health. And so I found that, that wisdom from you, Gail, but also everybody, about tuning into that thing about, so what's still for me? What's still for me? Because other things have come up, one being defend our juries, actually. So, that really just nourish me in ways that other things no longer do. And so it was very helpful. It's been really helpful to have that validated. One of the things that I have been more involved in is with the resilience team for Just Stop Oil. And I found that I ran a meditation group for them. I don't involve myself in any of the actual actions, but I run a meditation group and other, you know, things like emotional debriefs and things. But there's something about that world that sucked me in that is quite driven, and I know I need to just let some of that go. So which kind of links to what you were saying, Gail, about what do you do when there's conflict between activists? What do you do then? So that's something I'm going to take away and meditate on, and do some more of that right brain stuff. So yeah, I think I'm going to stop now, because I could go on forever. Now I've opened my mouth, I could. Yeah, so thank you, everybody. Thank you, Gail, and really, really, you know, with you in heart and mind next week.
Thank you, Lizzie. Appreciate that and all the work you're doing. I think Belle might be able to send around this collaborative practices toolkit. One of the things Mickey Cashtan used to say is that conflict is feedback that's not being processed soon enough or something. But one of the things I've sort of come to realise in this last year with a conflict it's been weighing me down, but is that we can have lots of systems and processes, but we've sort of got to mean it. We've got to start from the starting point that says, and you can use whatever language you want, whether it's patriarchy or domination paradigm or wet eco whiteness or whatever, you know, the anti-life systems, however you think of modernity, whatever, blah blah blah. But that is in us. Like we have it. We've got the program, several programs in us, and if we don't go into spaces with that, what our African families say, overstanding, you know, and look at bigger perspective, and the intention and will together to meet the times and meet conflicts and deal with them as things that, I don't know if people saw, Navigate did a session a while ago, a movement like no other, and they were saying like conflict is teaching us something. So if we're not really willing to sort of say, you know, not be like, if you do, we're all dicks at times, aren't we? All do stupid things, like just to meet it with some humor and apology, and but for us to know that that's going to come and have the intention. That's what I've really been a bit surprised, shocked about in some activist spaces. We don't mean it. Whatever systems, processes you like, they can be gamed if you're not aware of how the systems are in us and what they get up to, you know. So it's interesting times, and therefore, like I think, you know, I don't really know the culture in JS, so I feel they're like family, you know, like not so close, but with, I don't know, everybody is what I mean, but like I'd be mindful, not about JSO or anybody really, but about a conflicts really. Are people genuine about being curious about them and what's underneath and solving them? Or they just need to be, like, they need to be right, you know? I need to be right. I need to come out of this on top. Oh, I've got that program. It's not gonna go well then, is it? Do you see what I mean? So anyway, thank you.
I missed the beginning of the call, and I apologize for that. There's so many things that have come up, and I'm really interesting stuff. I think just one thing I wanted to say is that there are playful ways of being in the world and talking about climate, and I'm a sculptor and an animator, and I'm showing work about air pollution and biodiversity loss and things like that, and it really nurtures me to make this work. The topic is tough, but I love the process that I'm going through, and I seem to be reaching some people now, and it is possible, and people do want to hear it, and I think it's an interesting way to reach people who don't necessarily anticipate talking about the climate crisis in the public space. So yeah, I'm not trying to tell you to go and be an artist, but I feel blessed that these are tools that I'm using at the moment, which seem to be helpful to open up conversations and be playful with people. Yeah.
I put my email in the chat, Joe. I'd love to see some of your work if you
Sure.
email me. It might be a while before I get to it because I've got this other stuff. And I'm in connection with a fantastic guy called Paul Goodenough who did the Rewriting Extinction comic book.
Wow.
Right at the heart of lots of comic writers. So there might be some collaboration there. So send me some stuff. But
Okay.
thank you for bringing that in because yeah, like I'm a nerd. So when people are asking about communications, I'm sort of like, I know I can orate sometimes, but yeah, like getting a message over to sort of ordinary people, it's a skill, isn't it? And that's what our artists are there for. So blessings, thank you. We all have our role here, don't we?
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. I might actually try and track down your details if it's okay. I'm going to put together the resources, lots of the books that we mentioned, obviously the link to the week, in an after session document. So and so that people have that resource. I just want to thank Gail so much for this. Yeah, it was really moving, Gail, and just what I think the first time that my collapse awareness has been so responded to in a way, even within my circles of activism, we haven't spoken so directly about, I don't know how that works really, but it's, yeah, this has been wonderful. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to spend a little time actually saving all the notes and making sure that I've captured the recording. And then I will share them with you all afterwards. But thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you, everyone.
Lots of love.
Thank you.
Well,
everyone.
I feel privileged to have been in this call, actually. Thank you very much, Gail, with everything that's going on in your life at the moment and taking time to collapse us. Yeah, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you.
Well, if anybody wants to join the party on Monday at Isleworth, you're very welcome. It's 10 o'clock. I think there might be some Defend Our Juries people there. But oh, goodness. Okay.
I'm sure there will be.
Enjoy. Anyway, lots of love. Take care of you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.